Hi everyone, Charlotte here from New Zealand Shores. Today we're joined with ex-client and friend of New Zealand Shores, Virginia Reason. Virginia has been through quite a visa process to get to the point where she is at now, but I thought it was a good time to bring her on as we're starting to see inquiries from the US skyrocket. And I thought it'd be really good to perhaps give potential migrants an idea of what are the 5 things that New Zealand does a lot better than the US and things that might attract you to move to New Zealand. So, Virginia, do you want to give us a breakdown, very short breakdown of your visa journey?
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, so I started my journey to New Zealand on a working holiday visa back in 2014. And then from there, got a job in Christchurch, got, my contract extended. So I was on a temporary work visa to see that out. Once that expired, I moved to Wellington on another temporary work visa for 3 years. And during that time, I met my husband and gained my residency through him on the partner work visa. So that was probably one of the easier ways to go. But yeah, that's been my visa journey, and I will be in New Zealand 10 years in July.
Wow. So that you've basically had virtually every visa type a person could have between your working holiday, your work visas, partnership visas, and now a residency visa. Have you got your
Yes.
permanent residence yet?
Yes, no, I gained my permanent residency in 2021, I believe. And that was in October. So the next step will be gaining citizenship so I can hold that dual passport because as a US citizen, you can hold both a New Zealand and a US passport.
Yeah, New Zealand's actually one of the few countries in the world that allows you to hold multiple passports. So I've
Mm.
had clients that have had 3 or 4, and New Zealand
Yeah.
doesn't have any issue with that. But if you do hold passports other than US passports, you do have to check that those other countries allow dual citizenship.
Yes.
Because some countries do limit how many passports you can hold. But most of our
Yes.
clients are vying for that little black book at the end of their immigration journey. So,
Yes. It'll be nice to hold that little black book.
for lack of a better term. Awesome. So you've been in New Zealand for 10 years, so you've obviously got a pretty good idea of what New Zealand possibly does well, what we don't do well, what we do better
Yes.
than the US. One thing we often get asked about from people all over the world is work-life balance. So as
Yes.
Kiwis, I think we've got a pretty good work-life balance, but how do you feel about that?
I have to say the work-life balance here in New Zealand has been a world of difference compared to the work-life balance in the States. Prior to coming to New Zealand and starting my overseas trip, I held a job in the States, to gain up some income before traveling. And I was lucky enough to have 20 work day or 20 holiday days. But compared to some of my other friends who, and what you hear throughout is you don't have that quite, that amount of annual leave. But here in New Zealand, no matter where you are, you get 20 days annual leave and 10 days sick leave. So that's been massive because, those 10 days you can take at any time. And also with the work life balance with the annual leave, you can take it in one chunk, and it is also viewed as a health and safety hazard. So your employer will actually encourage you to take your annual leave. And they want to see that you're using it instead of building it up. Um, Also, in terms of flexibility, particularly since the pandemic, most employers are flexible now to have, you work from home if you have appointments or, you don't, or any sort of housework that needs to be done. You can easily work from home, and usually employers don't have an issue with that, just as long as the work is being done. So it's really nice to have that balance, particularly when you're going overseas to visit family or go on a trip. So, yeah.
I think the other thing I often get feedback from is for most of our clients who have moved to New Zealand and been here for a little while, work finishes at the end of your workday. You're not expected to
Yes.
take work home. You're not expected to answer your phone after hours. You're not expected to answer your emails after hours. It's all pretty normal.
No.
Work is work and home is home. So I think that's also, is that something you've noticed as well?
Oh, yes, definitely. That's also been the thing. Like once your workday finishes, you finish and you don't most people don't bring work home with them unless you've got a big project that you need to do. But if you do have to say bring work home, my employers have been very gracious, and any overtime that I needed to do at home, I can then take in lieu and leave early on a day, or a Friday or a Thursday, or if I have an appointment, just take that time. They're very flexible in that regard.
Which is awesome. And just on that leave thing, so you've got your first little baby due not too far away. Do you just
Yes.
perhaps quickly chat about how maternity leave works in New Zealand? Because that's obviously completely different to what you get in the States.
Yes, so maternity leave is one of the big upsides about living here in New Zealand. So you get 6 months paid maternity leave, and that, has a certain cap on it. But the best part about it is if you've been at your job for a year, your employer is obligated to keep your position available for up to a year. If you've been with an employer for 6 months, they're required to keep it for up to 6 months. And if you've just started and you don't meet that criteria, your partner or husband could take that parental leave in lieu as well. So either partner gets 6 months paid maternity leave. And that is one of the biggest upsides to it all, is that your job will be safe when going on maternity leave, and getting at least 6 months up to a year, but also 6 months paid, which is huge.
Yeah, I will just clarify for people. So it is the New Zealand government that does pay that maternity leave. So it's not your employer. So you don't receive your full wage. It is a percentage of, well, it's not even a percentage, it's just a certain amount. And that amount does vary depending on what your income is. But the maximum is, I believe, $700 per week before tax. Is that correct?
It's currently at 712, exactly, like $712 at the moment. And that is an increase from the previous year. So every financial year, which will be June 30th on July 1st, based on the cost of living, that paid maternity leave will vary.
It's pretty cool. So you can get paid to stay
Yes.
on with baby, which is amazing. I
Oh, that's
think that
correct.
that kind of segues into the next hot topic for a lot of Americans
Mm.
is free healthcare. So for
Yep.
those people who aren't aware, in New Zealand, we have basically free healthcare. If you go to the hospital, if you get sick or injured and you need to be treated at hospital, it's free. If you go to your GP, it's heavily subsidized. So most people pay between about 20 to 40 New Zealand dollars roughly. Some people pay less based on the socioeconomic status of the area they live in. Children under the age of 13 are free to go to the doctor. But that is a massive difference between here and the US, whereas a lot of people here don't have private health insurance. So some might, if you opt to. I mean, obviously it's there, and some people are used to that, or they just want to have that extra level of choice, I
Mm.
guess. But for most people, they rely on the public healthcare system. So is that a big
Mm.
adjustment for you, was not having to have that private health insurance?
Yes, it's just nice to know that if you have run into any sort of a medical emergency, that when you're a resident, you are guaranteed that care essentially. Or if you need any sort of checkup that needs to be done, it is subsidized by the government. So, yeah, no, that's really been an upside, particularly during pregnancy and last year going through an ACL reconstructive surgery. So I'll talk briefly about both of those. So last year when I had my surgery and my rehab is all covered by ACC, because the accident happened in New Zealand while completing a sport or an activity. um, we're lucky that we have ACC to actually cover that. And as part of my recovery and being pregnant, my rehab course has actually been paused when I told them that I was pregnant. And that gives me leeway to still pursue my recovery, but not pursue my funded recovery. And once I get the all clear, my rehab will then resume. So that's been great to have, knowing that I have that to go back to, and that my recovery won't be hindered in any way, shape, or form. And in terms of pregnancy, everything is subsidized except for a scan where you have to pay $60, but everything else, your midwife, your hospital stay, um, OBGYN if it's required. Um, if you're a high risk pregnancy, that is also covered. So you are very well taken care of in that space, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so having a baby is not going to result in a gigantic bill coming from the hospital, which is awesome.
Oh no.
I'll quickly just explain ACC. So,
Yes.
for us in New Zealand, we all know what ACC is, but it stands for the Accident Compensation Corporation. It applies to everyone. So even if you're here on a visitor visa, or if you're on a work visa, or a resident, or a citizen, everyone is entitled to ACC. And what it does is if you have a workplace accident, or if you're out playing sport like Virginia was, or I feel like I virtually always have an ACC claim in from running. What it does is it means that if you have to take time off work, the government will pay 80% of your wage. So it doesn't matter if you're on 50,000 or 300,000 a year, you will get 50%, 80% of your wage paid to you while you stay at home and recover, which is amazing. It also
Mm.
some things are free, so things like X-rays are often free under ACC, scans are sometimes free, and then things like osteos, physios, acupuncture, that stuff's highly subsidized. So for me to go see a physio, if I need to, it's about 20 or 30 New Zealand dollars. So the government pays the bulk of that to make sure that you get the treatment you require. It doesn't apply to illness, unfortunately, it is just accidents, but it's a really great scheme that the government has in place. So even if you're here on holiday, skiing perhaps, or mountain biking, and you come off and hurt yourself, the New Zealand government will actually pay under that ACC scheme for whatever treatment you require while you're in the country. So it's pretty awesome.
It really is. And also, in addition to pregnancy, if there is any sort of um, injury that happens during delivery or birth, that will be covered by ACC, which is great. And they will fund pelvic floor physio for you as well. And that was just a recent development as of October 2020. So that's a huge weight off my shoulders now, knowing that, you know, that this whole process, I'll have that if anything were to happen.
Yeah, which is awesome. So you're well looked after.
Yes,
Any other
very much.
comments you'd like to make about the healthcare system that I think are probably, or maybe things Americans should be aware of that are different?
Yes, so the one thing that varies from the US medical system and healthcare system is that dental is not covered for those over 18. And there is no dental insurance. And that is one of the big parts of the healthcare packages that is a part of, you know, employers and what is offered in the States. However, it is, you can get it covered when you buy private insurance. So while it's not covered by the public system, it is subsidized by private insurance and supplemental insurance. But if you come over with any children or have any children while over here, they will be covered for free dental care up to the age of 18.
Which is pretty amazing. The only thing that is outside that free dental care for kids is braces. So if your children do need braces, unfortunately, brace yourself, for lack of a better term, because that is quite
Oh, yes.
expensive. But otherwise,
Uh,
it's pretty good.
yes, and I think that is similar from what I recall is similar from the States as well, depending on the situation of, you know, whatnot, of what goes on with your teeth. I've been through the whole system. Yeah, it's a bit extra, but not as heavily subsidized. So, yeah.
Awesome. Another comment we often get, I think I probably hear it more from Kiwis going to America. They talk about how different the food is. So in New Zealand, obviously, we are the land of milk and honey. Well, that's what we like to call ourselves. We produce enough food to feed 40 million people per year. So we're a big primary industry country. So we get lots of fresh, healthy food that is readily available. Of course, it is slightly more expensive than, you know, junk food or processed food, but it is everywhere. And we do have therefore access to really high quality food. So was that something you noticed when you came? Was it the food was quite different?
Oh, yes. And especially when going back home to visit family, everything just tastes a lot more fresh here, especially from the supermarket. It is, you know, as my mom put it when she came to visit earlier this year, food actually tastes like food. It doesn't taste processed, it doesn't contain heaps of sugar. And until you leave the United States, do you actually realize how much sugar is actually in all of the food that we consume, whether we know it or not. For example, my husband and I were on our honeymoon in Fiji September last year, and we were sitting at a table with other people from the US who were honeymooning as well. And we each got desserts. And my husband and I were like, "Ooh, this is really sweet." And the people who are from the United States were like, "This is bland." Like they didn't taste anything. And whereas we're sitting there looking at each other like we can taste this full stop. And I think that really hit home um that for the couples that we were sitting with. And also, when my husband, he plays inline hockey, when they were going to the States for tournaments, they had trouble finding decent bread because the bread just tastes like cake,
Mm.
apparently. And you do notice the amount of sweetener that is in bread when you actually consume it when you come back to the States. Um, and somebody who I actually met recently, she's from LA, now goes to a bakery because she can't stand store-bought bread, even from Whole Foods or Trader Joe's.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing. I
yeah,
think when you're so used to eating one way, you probably don't realize that there may be such a big difference elsewhere in the world. But it's
yeah,
incredible to know that that other American couple just thought the food was so bland, and you guys found the
yeah,
complete opposite because your palates have
yes.
adjusted. Wow.
Yeah. No, and it really, and you do notice it when you go back as well. Your body really adjusts to the food, and especially when you're coming over here as well, there is that time adjustment both ways when you are eating, essentially cleaner food versus heavily processed, sugary food. So yeah, that's something to be aware of.
Do you feel like it's been a good adjustment though? You don't miss the food in the US? Well, you've been here 10 years, so I guess you
I
don't.
mean, there are some things that I do miss about the food in the States, that you can't get here in New Zealand. But for the most part, you just learn to make do, or if you are lucky enough and happen to settle in Wellington, there's a US shop in Johnsonville and they have an online store. So if there's anything that you're craving or that you want, you just jump on there and they have a wide selection for you to pull from.
And I guess Amazon ships here, don't they? So we're not so
Yes.
remote that we don't get Amazon. So I'm sure if there's anything in particular people
Oh,
miss,
yeah.
order it online too.
It's great. Or and if you go home, you like I do, you just bring some snacks back with you and request for some of your friends too. So
Fill up an entire suitcase.
exactly. I already have my shopping list for mom when she comes out in July for when baby comes. So
Maybe she needs to bring a whole separate suitcase. Um,
yes, I think so.
just on that online shopping thing, I know it wasn't one of our talking points, but is that something you've noticed? Because obviously people think of New Zealand, we're at the bottom of the world, less products available. Do you find that if there's things you want from the States that they're just as readily available, or is that something you think New Zealand's lacking on a bit?
Um, no, if there's things that you need or want, you can get. And as Charlotte stated, Amazon does ship to New Zealand. Same with most other clothing companies. Or yeah, most businesses now, and if they are located in the States, they will ship to New Zealand. Just beware of cost and shipping,
Mhm.
depending on how much you buy. But New Zealand pretty much has everything that you really need while over here. However, in terms of electronics, if you choose to relocate to New Zealand and you have any large appliances, hair dryers, KitchenAids, those need to be left back into the States, because the voltage is different. And that is something to also be aware of if you choose to settle in New Zealand, to consider when selling or giving away items and looking to purchase new here in New Zealand.
Yeah, I can attest that. So my husband's an electrician, and I definitely know he said don't go changing plugs on US appliances because you either blow a fuse or blow up the appliance. So best to just steer clear if you can and buy new when you get here.
Exactly.
That is another interesting point. So I often get asked, how much do we bring? Do we fill up a whole container and bring our entire house, or do we bring just clothes, or do we do a bit of both? And that really is a personal decision. So people will do all sorts. We get people who do bring their entire house in their car. Cars from the US to New Zealand can be a bit difficult because obviously left-hand drive, right-hand drive. So it's
Mhm.
probably one thing that is better to just buy new when you get here. But it is really up to you. So other than those appliances, if you've got the rest of your house you want to bring, that's cool. You can chuck it in a container. You don't pay tax on arrival when you hold a visa that's 12 months or longer, which is awesome. So you just bring your belongings into the country, or you might decide you're just going to bring 2 or 3 suitcases and buy the rest when you get here. We do get the odd comment that furniture and things are a bit more expensive here and that the options are a bit more limited. I guess that's just a side effect of sitting at the bottom of the world, unfortunately.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes, no, and to attest to that, it is really easy to get things shipped over. Mom cleaned out the house when they moved, and I was able to get a container of stuff over from the States, and it was a fairly seamless process. So
And the cost of shipping is starting to go down again after COVID, which
yes.
is because I know it was quite expensive for those people that sent
Oh
stuff on
yes.
while the borders were closed, just because
Oh
no
yeah.
planes were flying. So it was a
Yeah.
bit different, but we're heading back to normal, which is good.
Yes.
Um, the other thing we often get Americans commenting on is the cost of education in New Zealand and school terms and school holidays. Education, well, even if you want to come on a student visa, it's often cheaper to come and study as an international student in New Zealand than what it is as, studying in America. Is that something you've noticed as well, that, obviously the school year is different because our summer
Mhm.
falls in a different part of the year, but
Yes.
holidays, I mean, you're working at a school at the moment, so you're probably the
Mhm.
best person to talk about that.
Yes, so currently working at a state integrated school, and I have to say it's great from, a personal perspective because when you think back to schooling in the States and particularly elementary, primary, or yeah, elementary, middle, and high school, so primary, intermediate, and secondary here in New Zealand, um, you would sit through, your terms. You have 2 semesters, 4 terms, um, with really relatively no break in between and having that long summer break. Whereas here in New Zealand, at the end of each term, you get a 2-week holiday. And that's really great from my perspective because it helps really break it up for both teachers and students. Can be a bit of a burden on parents, but again, with the flexible working environment and work-life balance, and most employers are very flexible in that space. People choose to take 2 weeks of their annual leave for one of those, um, like for one of those school holidays, so you can go on a trip. Best time to really go, if you're looking to escape the cold winters of New Zealand, is going in July, or even in the July school holidays or the September, October school holidays. And given that there are like that 2-week break in between each term, summer break is a bit shorter, where it can last up to 8 to 6 weeks. But in the grand scheme of things, that's when everything really slows down, both businesses and schools being shut down. It's very relaxed. And it's great because especially during the Christmas and New Year holiday, you get Boxing Day off, you get the day after New Year's Day off. So essentially, you can take anywhere between 6 to 4, annual leave days, depending on when Christmas falls.
Mm.
So that's a real plus during that time.
And our public holidays get Mondayized as well. So if
Yes.
what that means is if a public holiday falls on a weekend, then they actually move the day off until the following Monday or Tuesday. So if
Mm,
Christmas Day and Boxing Day fall on a Saturday and a Sunday, you actually get the weekend, and then you get the Monday, Tuesday off as well. And the
mm,
same with New Year's Day and the day after New Year's Day. So I think 9 times out of 10 when I'm taking annual leave, because New Zealand Shores shuts down for 2 weeks over Christmas,
mm.
I normally only take about 6 annual leave days for about 2 weeks off work. So it works out
Yeah.
really well for us, which is
It
good.
really, it really does. And most businesses do shut down for those 2 weeks between Christmas and New Year's. Very rarely will you have an employer requiring you to be at work those 3 days between Christmas and New Year's, which is a very commonality and very common thing in the States. And also in terms of Easter, you get Easter Monday off, whereas in the States, you don't have Easter Monday. And schools have Easter Monday and Easter Tuesday off. So they get an extra day on top of that as well. Unfortunately, employers don't, but hopefully, touch wood, that it will be changing in the near future.
Yeah, because that is definitely a bugbear for parents. Well, the parents I work
Okay.
with anyway, it's a
Mm,
normal work day on that Tuesday, but their kids are off school. But again, flexibility, and 9 times out of 10,
exactly.
your employers will realize that, hey, actually, every single person with kids is in the same boat. So if you don't have someone else who can look after them, your employers will typically let you take that time off, which is cool. And our school year runs from February through till, depends, I mean, how old your children are, but if your children are primary school age, typically finish about 10 days before Christmas. If your children are high school age, normally sort of sometime in November, depending on exams. So our school year runs basically in line with summer as well, which is cool. So they get that
Yeah.
summer break over
Yeah.
the Christmas time, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And how about those university fees? Because that's a big talking point with a lot of our
Yes.
people who are looking to migrate, whether, like I said, on the basis of a student visa, or they've got kids who are nearing that university age. So that's
Mm.
obviously a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that is a huge difference, particularly with student loans being interest free. That is, a massive one. You're not walking away from, you know, thousands of dollars in debt. You can easily pay it down fairly quickly. There are more scholarship opportunities, which help make those fees a lot easier to recover. And unlike the States, you're not paying insane international student fees to go study in the States versus if you decide to come here and study in New Zealand full term. And you get people that choose to do post-grad down here as well, which is easily affordable. I've come across a few people who've decided to do post-grad overseas, either in Australia or New Zealand, just because the tuition fees are much cheaper than doing a post-grad study in the States. So that's something to consider if you are looking to come and study, particularly post-grad. It's a great opportunity to, study over here, live over here. I know during my working holiday visa, I was interviewing with a university in the States for a potential position, and it was a great opportunity for me to talk about, why I chose to do this, what's so different about this experience. And it just adds a little bit to the resume when you are applying for jobs because you're doing something a bit different
Mhm.
and not doing the stock standard mold that a normal person would do.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, I think to wrap it up, I think
Hmm.
we'll talk about the highlight first. So what has been the most game-changing thing, or the biggest improvement to your life, or the highlight of moving to New Zealand that you've really noticed now that you've been here almost a decade?
I think it's just the quality of life that I have down here. I've a lot more relaxed, if things get tough, you've got help along the way. And, it's a great place to be. The people are nice. The scenery's nice. Living in the South Island, you're in adventure land pretty much. Based in Christchurch, you're not far from skiing, hiking, you name it, you can do it. Um, and yeah, it's just been a great opportunity. Got to meet my husband, get to raise my kids down here. So pretty stoked about that.
Perfect. And then we'll keep it honest. So what has been, I guess, the hardest bit or the worst bit about living in New Zealand?
The hardest bit, like you would any resettling anywhere you would go in the world, is just being away from friends and family that you've made, back at home in the States. Luckily, the great thing about it is how accessible New Zealand is to the United States. Yes, we might be so far down on the other side of the world, but it could be a 2, 3 plane trip home. And being from the East Coast, you take that extra step, you fly cross country, but Air New Zealand, Qantas, other airlines, they have heaps of flight options for you to take. whether you're flying to LA, San Francisco, Houston, or even New York now. Um, it's pretty much accessible from anywhere in the country. So
And if you're
it's a
coming
negative, but also a positive.
Yeah. If you're coming on holiday, that exchange rate very much favors you while you're in the country at the moment.
Oh,
So if
yes.
you're looking at
Oh,
an
yes.
free trip, it's a good time to come right now.
Oh, definitely. Or even looking to resettle and buy a house. The exchange rate is great.
So lots of cool options there. Oh,
Mm.
thank you so much for your time today. We really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Charlotte.
This will be so valuable for those people who are considering a move from the US to New Zealand, because I know often we seem like this very tiny little country at the bottom of the world, and compared to the US, we're minuscule. So I think a lot of
Mm.
people often wonder, what are the good bits about being here, and is it
Mhm.
worth the move? And would you say it's worth the move?
100% worth the move. I haven't, as I said, been here 10 years, haven't regretted my decision once.
Well, there you go, guys. That's straight from someone who's grew up in the States and has been here for a while, and they absolutely love it. So hopefully we'll get you back again soon, Virginia, to talk through some different parts about being an American living in New Zealand. But for
Yep.
now, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you to New Zealand Shores for all your help along the way.
More than welcome. All right. Thanks heaps, guys. We'll be back next week with another video. See you later.
Lots of